My hubby and I planned a big celebration for our first anniversary, but my mean Mill belittled me and my family in front of everyone and asked my cleaner dad to handle the leftovers and trash. Gold digging can't change the low-class family you're born into. Mill had no clue her whole plan was about to backfire. When Phil dropped the real story about how he met her, and the whole crowd gasped. I've been married to Noelle for a year, and we have been together for 3 years, including 1 year of marriage. We have a fairly good relationship, and I would say the only person who doesn't really like us together is his mother, and she made it very clear at our anniversary party recently by humiliating me and my dad. But she got her karma almost instantly, and now she's trying to make me feel bad for it. Just for context, both his mother and I are from immigrant families, and when he first introduced me to his mother, I thought it would make her like me more. But I guess she had some internalized hatred or something, because she instantly disliked me. My grandparents are Malaysian and her parents were Indian, and Noelle and I have often discussed how our grandparents had to struggle so much when they first came into this country. So by that logic, I thought his mom would be soft towards me. But not only did she instantly hate me and act weirdly, she also looked down upon me even more after she found out that my dad used to be a janitor. My grandfather, unfortunately, passed away from a cardiac arrest when my dad was in his junior year of high school, and my grandma, who had been a stay-at-home mom until then, had to take up work, and so did my dad, because otherwise, they never would have been able to survive. My grandfather had been a low-level office employee, so they didn't have a lot of money set aside anyway. And after his passing, their savings started dwindling pretty quickly. Even with both of them working, my grandma and my dad could barely survive and were literally living hand-to-mouth. My grandma had never had any formal education, so she could only get odd jobs, which never paid enough. So after he graduated from high school, my dad gave up any idea of going to college and started working as a janitor in a law firm. He worked there for several years, supported his mother, and kept saving money and lived as frugally as he possibly could. That's also where he met my mother, also the daughter of immigrant Malaysian parents who were struggling. But at least she was in a better financial position. She had been hired as the receptionist when he had been working there for almost 3 years, and soon after, they started dating. Within 2 years, they were married, and both of them quit their jobs to start their own business. They started a restaurant, and shortly after they were open for business, my mom found out that she was pregnant with me, and soon enough, I was born. Even after they started their own business, there were days that they had to struggle a lot, and up until I was almost 12 years old, I had watched my parents live on as little money as they could. But then, things started getting better, and the restaurant started doing well. Now that I'm 24, I finished high school, and I even have a business degree and help my parents run the restaurant and handle the business aspect of it while they're preparing to retire soon. So that's the story of my parents, and I'm really proud of them. I know Noel's grandparents struggle as well, but it was much different from ours. We had to struggle financially, whereas his grandparents had already been married and came from a pretty rich family when they moved here. So money was not an issue for them. They found it relatively easy to set up their business, but their problems were more of the racial kind, if you catch my drift. So in a sense, they've had to struggle as well, but just not in the same way. But my mother-in-law had always had a very comfortable life, and it got even better after she married her husband, because my father-in-law came from a long line of businessmen and had a flourishing company that he was in line to inherit when he started dating my mother-in-law. Noel's mom worked for a couple of months after she got married, but then she found out that she was pregnant with him. She quit, and since then, she's been a stay-at-home mom. I know that she loves Noelle more than anything else, and I expected her to extend that love to me as well because her son loves me, but unfortunately, that never happened. In the past 3 years, she has taken up every opportunity to belittle me and very snarkily reminded me of the kind of family that I came from, and has made it very clear that in her head, even though both of us are from immigrant families, we couldn't be more different. It's been very obvious that as long as she's around, I'm never going to fit in with her family because my parents are not of the same financial class, and working hard to bring themselves up to her position is not going to change that fact. I have always found her attitude towards me pretty bizarre because she seems to hold the fact that my dad used to be a janitor against me as if it was a crime. And on top of that, my dad doesn't even work as a cleaner anymore. He has his own business, and even though he's not exactly very rich, he's still doing well for himself, and I'm really proud of everything that he has accomplished along with my mom. In my initial days of dating Noelle, I used to feel bad about how his mother was treating me, but this time, I just stopped paying attention to her. I didn't want to pick fights with her, so I never would respond to her stupid remarks anyway. But I didn't have to because Noel would always stand up for me, and I let him because that seemed to make her even more upset. I could have easily told Noel that I did not want her in my life, and we could have cut her out on a permanent basis, but then I chose not to do that. The only reason I let her stay involved in our life was because of my father-in-law, who is a really good man. Every time that we meet, he apologizes afterward, because every single time my mother-in-law treats me badly, and he notices that. I know for a fact that if we cut my mother-in-law off, things will become very difficult for Noel and his father because she's going to make sure of it, and that's why. I've never even tried to do that because it's just not worth it. But at my anniversary party earlier this week, I guess everyone had had enough, and my father-in-law himself decided to stand up for me when my mother-in-law crossed the line. So to celebrate 1 year of our marriage, Noel and I had invited our families, including our extended family and many of our friends. We had rented a venue and stuff. We were doing it up really big. Everything was going well. But midway through the party, my mother-in-law decided that she was going to make some cutting remarks about my dad for no reason. So all of a sudden, when she noticed that somebody had dropped some food on the floor, she said in her loudest possible voice that she would like my dad to pick it up and start cleaning because the place was getting dirty. It was just bizarre and really insulting already, and then she took it to the next level. Speaking loudly enough for everyone around her to hear it, she faced my dad, and she told him that now that the party was slowly wrapping up, he had better start handling the leftovers and trash. So he left the place squeaky clean to maintain his reputation. My parents couldn't even bring themselves to say anything to her, and I was furious. So I decided to tell my mother-in-law that it was enough. But when I told her that, she snapped at me and started screaming in my face, telling me that gold digging is not going to change the kind of family that I was born into, and I was always going to remain lower-class trash, and that she regrets letting her son marry. When she was screaming in my face, she reeked of alcohol, so I knew that she was drunk, and that's why all of this was happening, and it was very embarrassing. And I was about to fight back, but my father-in-law decided that he was going to intervene and held my mother-in-law back from getting any closer to me. Then he started yelling at her, threatening to tell everyone exactly how and where he met her. From the expression on her face, I could tell that this was not something she wanted people to know. And I instantly decided that since she had made it a point to humiliate my father in front of so many people, it was only fair that the same thing should happen to her. So I told my father-in-law that the only reason Noel and I hadn't cut his wife out of our lives was for his sake, because we didn't want any drama. But now that so many lines have been crossed, the least that he can do for us is stand up for what is right. He seemed to understand what we were hinting at. And even as my mother-in-law was trying to get him to stop, he started telling everybody the real story behind the two of them meeting before their marriage. So as I had mentioned earlier, my mother-in-law had never had to struggle financially like my parents had to, and that was something that she prided herself on, even though she herself had nothing to do with it. It had been her parents and grandparents who had been rich enough to provide her with a comfortable life. Unfortunately, I think towards the time before she had started dating her husband, her dad had taken to gambling out of sheer overconfidence, and slowly but steadily, he had ended up losing a lot of money. He was in debt and was on the verge of selling his company, so he started speaking to his business associates, one of whom happened to be my father-in-law's dad. So long story short, that's how they ended up together. My father-in-law's dad bought out my mother-in-law's dad's company to prevent it from going under and helped him clear all his debts. But since then, her father was no longer an independent businessman. He had to report to my father-in-law's dad and work under him. Even my mother-in-law had to work under them. But lucky for her, my father-in-law really liked her and asked her out for a date, to which she agreed, and that's how they ended up married. By announcing this in front of everyone, he reminded my mother-in-law that she was not above anyone else and neither was she superior. The only reason she had money right now was because her husband had earned it, and the reason she had been leading a comfortable life before was because her father and grandfather had worked hard, and when they failed, her father-in-law had rescued their family from poverty. So she had no right to be making fun of me trying to humiliate my parents, when in reality, her own story wasn't all that impressive either. After he was done screaming at her and announcing the story to everyone, most of his relatives were literally gasping because that's how shocked they were, and I can't even blame them. It's not that her past was shady or something. It's just that she had always pretended that she was above everyone else because she had been married into an upper-class family and had also come from a similar family. She had taken so much pride in it, and now everyone knew that it was just a facade. I, for one, was really happy that finally the reality of the situation was out because I knew that there had to be something shady about her. She always acted so rich and snobby, like I was beneath her. But in reality, at least my parents were hardworking and honest. They had accomplished everything on their own, whereas her family had to rely on somebody else to be rescued. So I might not be from an upper-class family like her, but I'm also not the daughter of a gambler who wasted everything that he had earned and been given. And I guess she realized that now that her story was out, people were probably not going to look at her in the same way, and that was going to be her own fault. So she ran out of the venue with tears in her eyes, and nobody even went after her. We just served dinner after that because the mood had been effectively ruined, and then everybody went home. Noel and I were both surprised about whatever we had found out that day because even he hadn't known this about his mother. It made what she was doing all the more disgusting because she knew that had it not been for her husband and his family's help, her own family probably wouldn't have been able to survive either. She should have been compassionate towards me, but instead, she had been nothing but cruel. And now, she expects me to be compassionate towards her for whatever reason and apologize for egging her husband on that day and forcing him to tell everybody her story that she had kept secret for so long because she did not want his family judging her or thinking of her as a gold digger. Now that everyone knew the truth, she knew that his family would never perceive her in the same way, and it was all my fault. So she texted me that she expected me to apologize for it publicly. That was not all that she demanded of me. She also said that she wanted me, Noelle, and my father-in-law to acknowledge the fact that whatever had been said that day should not have been said in public, and we're all really ashamed of our behavior because we had used her past against her in retaliation for just a couple of jokes that she had made at the expense of my father. I'm not even joking. This is exactly what she sent to me a couple of days after the incident, and it's been 24 hours since I received this message from her. And since I had not responded, she decided to send me another message a couple of hours ago telling me that I owe this to her because the way she had been humiliated had been far worse than whatever she had done. By her logic, everyone already knew that my father used to be a janitor. It was not a big secret, and I didn't even have that many extended family members present at the party. On my side, it was just a cousin and my aunt who had recently moved here for work, and that was it. But she had a lot of family members who had been attending who had no idea about the situation with her father. In addition to that, she also had her husband's family present at the party who were now definitely going to judge her and look down on her because, naturally, she was indebted to her husband's family. I don't understand how she jumped to the conclusion that people would be judging her, but even if they do, it's going to be her own fault because she's always done the same to other people. Anyway, she expects me to apologize, and I've already spoken to Noel about it. And he doesn't think that it's necessary at all. In fact, he believes that it's better for us to cut her out of our lives altogether. The two of us are on the same page, but it's his father who's extremely torn up right now. His father believes that we should just do whatever she asks us because after the party, she didn't go back home. She's been staying away from him in a hotel and has been refusing to even talk to him unless we do what she has demanded. My father-in-law really regrets what happened at the party because he says that he lost his temper and he ended up humiliating her for her behavior. Even though he still doesn't think that the way my mother-in-law had been treating me was fair, he thinks that he went too far himself and wants to fix his relationship with his wife before it's too late. So he's been requesting us to do whatever she has asked us to along with him just so that she'll come back. So this is the dilemma that Noel and I have been having since his father clearly is not ready to give up on his marriage and his mom is not going to come back until we apologize. But apologizing to her is not something that either of us thinks is going to be appropriate because we don't think that we are at fault. She did this to herself, and if anything, she should be apologizing to us right now. Not even Noel. She should at least be apologizing to me and my dad. On the other hand, though, I really feel bad for my father-in-law because he clearly loves his wife, and he's not ready to lose her. And he did take a stand for us on the day of the party, so I would feel really bad if he ended up losing his wife because of us even after standing up for our sake. I'm just really confused right now. AITA for not wanting to apologize to my mother-in-law even though it'll cost my father-in-law his marriage? Update 1. Hi. So Noel and I have decided that we have no need to apologize. We fought about everything for a really long time. It's been almost 2 weeks since the incident, and his mother has still not gone back home. His father has kept requesting and pleading with us to just do whatever she says, but we are not doing any of that. He has posted a public apology on social media by himself, but since our names are not attached to it, Noel's mother has not responded. It's just damaging her own marriage, nothing else, because we definitely do not care about whether she comes back home to her husband or not. That's not for us to worry about in the first place since she was never worried about how it would look for the family if she insulted me and my dad in public. And honestly, whatever happened at the party, it was too little too late. I should have taken a stand for myself before any of this ever happened, and then maybe she never would have dared to cross me and my family. Before this, she had only restricted herself to making remarks when I was around, but behaved normally in front of my parents or in public settings. I guess on the day of the party, she just got a little too drunk and she couldn't hold back, but that's her problem to deal with, not mine. Regardless, I still should have stood up to her and pushed back a long time before any of this even started. Also, I'm really grateful to my father-in-law for standing up for us, but honestly, that's not enough. Even before this, he had done the same thing that we had been doing. We had been tolerating his wife's behavior. He had made it very clear to us that he did not approve of it, but he never did anything to stop it either. So while I am thankful I don't have to bow down in front of his wife and make myself smaller just for their marriage to work, I'm done trying to avoid drama just to keep things peaceful with my mother-in-law. She definitely doesn't deserve it. And if my father-in-law wants to, he can continue trying to appease her. But Noel and I have made it very clear to him that we have no part to play in that. Whatever happened on the day of the party, it was the last straw for all of us. But so far, Noel's father has not been very accepting of that decision and has still kept trying to get us to change our minds. He's been texting us every day, telling us that he really needs us to help him out here because his wife is not going to come back to him unless we apologize to her as well. He has even told us that we don't even need to mean the apology. All we have to do is just say that we are sorry. But Noel and I are not even willing to do that because it's just going to be a bad look for all of us. And I really can't understand why his father doesn't get that. After what happened at the party, I'm obviously not going to be apologizing to Noel's mother. That is obvious. What I find even more weird is that he keeps trying to make us feel guilty by bringing up the fact that he had stood up for us at the party, and now it's our turn to return the favor or something. I had mentioned this in my original post as well. This is something that I had thought about as well, that we should help him out because he had spoken up and pushed back against his wife for my sake at the party, and that's why I felt like I owed him something. But now that I think about it, he just did the decent thing. Yes, Noel and I had egged him on, which is why he ended up telling everybody the story that my mother-in-law was trying to hide for so long. But even that was a decision that he had made. I couldn't have forced him to do that, neither could have No done that. So, ultimately, all that was on him and not us, and very frankly speaking, it was not like we had cracked a deal with him or something that he would stand up for us and then we would help him out. So for him to make it seem that way, it's just weird. He wasn't doing us some huge favor by doing the right thing like he's making it out to be. Even though these thoughts had crossed my mind earlier too, I'm no longer going to feel guilty about standing up for myself and pushing back. So as much as I hate to say it, I'm not going to be sympathetic towards my father-in-law and try to fix his marriage for him. His wife is a terrible person, and I honestly think that it's better for him if she just stays away from him. And I really don't think that it's going to last for a long time because that woman has not worked a day in her life. The only way she's going to maintain the same standard of living that she has so far is either by coming back to her husband or filing for divorce and waiting for her alimony paychecks. So I don't even understand what my father-in-law is so worried about. He knows for a fact that his wife is living off of his money. And even the hotel that she's staying in right now, she's using his car to pay for everything. If he wants her to come back, he should just block the card instead of behaving so prophetically. Anyway, that is his choice. He can choose how to deal with his marital problems. All I'm saying is that I'm not going to be a part of it and neither is Noel. Update 2. 1.5 weeks have passed since my last update, and before this, my father-in-law had only been texting us, requesting us to apologize to Noel's mother so that she would come back. But since we had stopped responding to him after a point, he decided to show up in person so that he could speak to us. This happened about 3 days back, and when we let him in, it was evident that he was extremely upset about everything that was going on. He looked really unkempt, and I actually felt bad for him until he opened his mouth. And to our surprise, he actually started yelling at us as soon as he was seated. He told us that he had stood up for us the day of the party, and yet we did not have that kind of gratitude that we should also help him out right now. He was screaming at us, telling us that he had been suffering for so long because his wife refused to speak to him, and yet the people that he had taken a stand for, those very same people, were so ungrateful that they couldn't even respond to his texts. I didn't have anything to say in that argument, but NGO got into a really heated fight with his dad that day. He said everything that I had been thinking, that his wife not speaking to him was not a problem that we had to deal with, and it was obviously just a power move to get everybody to apologize and behave the way that she wanted us to. And it was insane that he was even considering entertaining this power trip that she was on. He also told his dad that he had had enough of the diplomacy because now he could either be on our side or on his wife's side. And nobody was surprised when he told us that he would obviously be on his wife's side no matter how she had behaved. Because at the end of the day, he loved her and she loved him. Noel ended up telling him that she did not love him, and in fact, she was the actual gold digger in the situation and not me. And if his father didn't believe it, then he should just try blocking the card that she was using and see how quickly she ran back to him. At that point, I guess his father had had enough and he just walked out without a word. After that, we did not hear from him, and this morning, we realized that he had blocked us. But there's not much that we can do to help him out. If he wants to stay with a woman like that, that's his call. We just don't want anything to do with him or his wife anymore, and that's final. We're done. Update 3. So it's been about 2 months since the day of our anniversary party, and Noel and I have had absolutely no contact with his family since my last update, which was around 3 or 4 weeks back. Up until a couple of days back, we didn't even know what his parents were up to, but they decided to inform us themselves. His dad unblocked him and sent him a really long message saying that he had finally reunited with his wife, and he could see why she had never approved of me. And he had been a fool to ever stand up for me. He went on to say that his wife had been right in referring to me as a lower-class trash because that's exactly what I was. And I had proven it by deserting him and choosing not to apologize to my mother-in-law even though I knew that it was going to cost my father-in-law his marriage, even after he had stood up for me at the party and tried to be a good person. Clearly, I did not value that, and I just went on to show that I was somebody who would only use people for as long as it was convenient to them, typical to lower-class folks like me. And he was glad that he had finally reconciled with his wife and realized that I had corrupted Noel as well, and now he wanted nothing to do with either of us. He warned Noel that I would be done with him as soon as I had exhausted all his money and resources and moved on to my next victim. And then he would come crawling back to them, and they would accept him because he was their only son, but he had to know what a huge mistake he had made. They even had a message particularly for me telling me that I had tried my hardest to break their marriage up and ruin my mother-in-law's life just because I was upset that she had seen right through me and my act from the beginning itself. But I had failed, and I was never going to be able to hold on to Noel because, ultimately, someday, he would go back to his parents and realize what kind of a person I actually was. It was already ridiculous, and Noel and I didn't pay any attention to it. We decided to ignore it and move on with our lives.